So speaking of the issue of slavery heating up, how did abolitionists influence the understanding of the right to bear arms?
Well, in antebellum America, as slavery heats up, you both have an intensification of abolitionism and a response among pro-slavery forces. Now, what's interesting is, as we were talking about, you have this new problem of handgun violence and knife violence, because the Bowie knife in particular becomes a serious problem. So you get laws passed against carrying concealed weapons in both the North and the South, but interestingly, you only get cases brought to court in the South. And I now know, based on some research I've done since the book, that two different traditions emerge. In the North, it's much more restrictive. And in the South, it's much more divided. So some courts say, and this is interpreting their state arms-bearing provisions, some courts say, well, you can't do this because the right to bear arms is about an individual right and it's very expansive. Some courts say, well, the right to bear arms is an individual right, but this is okay. And then some courts say, well, it has nothing to do with individual rights. It's all about the militia, so obviously this is fine. So you get different traditions emerging among Southern slave-owning, slave-supporting judges. And no cases in the North, but also laws prohibiting carrying concealed weapons. That's the biggest development in terms of gun regulation in that period, the biggest new thing. And slowly, the abolitionists, as they become more and more targeted by anti-abolitionist violence, and this is not in the South, this is in places like Illinois and Philadelphia and parts of the North, they begin to fracture. They start out as Christian pacifists, that essentially we have to fight this with, the Bible. They eventually get to the point where they're starting to package Bibles and guns and ship them off to Kansas to settlers, and that's where we get this idea of breachers' Bibles, which are a word for rifles. So the abolitionist movement fractures, with the sort of Christian pacifists being militantly anti-firearms, anti-gun, and then an incredibly proactive. First, it's self-defense is okay, and so if somebody attacks you, your printing press, because you're printing abolitionist literature, you can defend yourself, but only if it's self-defense. Then it eventually morphs into this kind of John Brown, radical, truly radical, revolutionary, insurrectionary. John Brown has his own wild idea about what the Second Amendment means, and it basically is a right to arm slaves to overthrow slavery. Now, if you read the original Second Amendment, I guess you have to read in between the lines to see where they put that in there, but John Brown is pretty sure it's in there.